I'm here in Moyne Abbey. It's about 10 minutes from my house here in Mayo. It's on the west coast of Ireland, and behind us here you have the sea and the Moyne estuary going out into the Atlantic. And it's a place I come here to pray a lot. In the summer it's very pleasant here and you can sit down, pray a rosary. It's a very big complex, and this, I believe, would have been the refectory of the dining room of the monastery, where a Christian community would have gathered here. The monks would have gathered here, and any visitors would have gathered here in a very, very large monastic settlement. And I was thinking about the future of Irish faith. Where are we being drawn to? What do these monks live? What did they feed off? Why did they construct this monastery, from a quarry that's just behind this hill? What drove the saints of old? What captivated these men of the faith? And after meditating on this for so long, the only answer I can come up to is that personal union with God. You cannot be a Christian and not experience that personal union with God. Otherwise it becomes a book you've read, a person you've read about, a system, a moralism. But it's in here. We are called to a personal union with God. That union is where our heart is converted. Yesterday I was talking about the Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. So many times we can talk about the crucifixion, Jesus' passion. But do we move people's hearts when we're talking about this? Do we transform their hearts to have that engagement with Christ, with his church, with the faith? Many years ago, I went for the first time to the monks of Mount Athos, and their whole life, their whole day revolves around receiving pilgrims. So every day a new batch would come in, 50, 60, 70 men would arrive to the monasteries, and they would give them shelter, a bed. They would ask them to pray with them. They would give them food in their refectory. You would basically live the life of a monk with them during that day. And you were drawn into that experience of what they were experiencing. Their union with God challenged us to have a union with God. And so before you go to somebody to propose to them what Christ is asking us to do, if we do not have union with God, we cannot give Christianity to this world. It is simply impossible to preach Christ's message without being united to him. Which is why simple things like confession, Eucharist, prayer, rosary, all of these things are so powerful because they give us so much more unity with God. And in this time of much confusion in the church, division and so forth, the only answer for us Catholics in Ireland is this assent of ourselves to God, union with God. This is age old. Why were so many early Christians captivated by the desert fathers? There are no deserts here, but there are deserted places like this place on Moyne Abbey on the west coast of Ireland, deserted place where they came to encounter that union with God, to dedicate time to that union with God. Why do so many people struggle believing in God? Because we do not spend time to encounter him. And we are not credible witnesses ourselves of this. Many Catholic leaders, Catholic bloggers, we are not feeding people. We are distracting people. When I've done videos criticizing things, and I've done videos actually preaching about Christ's great encounter, more people are attracted to that than this. And so where is the Holy Spirit? Why are people reaching out? Robert, I'd like to become Catholic after your video, because we speak about our encounter with Christ. And this is what every Catholic should be doing in Ireland now. Speaking about your encounter with Christ. What has God done in your life? How did you encounter him? I went to one retreat as a teenager. One retreat. And it was with an Irish nun called Sister Bríd McKenna. That was the only retreat that we had. We were in a Catholic school where a lot of the nuns were already elderly and there was no religious coming up. And the last thing that these nuns did that I remember was to bring us to a retreat with Sister Breach McKenna. And I vividly remember Sister Breach talking about her being healed in the States. I think it was in Florida. And that stuck with me. That stuck with me as a teenager. How this woman, this great leader, spoke about her personal encounter with Christ. Why aren't we doing the same? Why aren't we talking about our personal encounter with Christ? And this is the great tragedy of Irish Catholicism, that we have forgotten what the saints of old did. How did they do what they did? How were able to evangelize Europe? How do you find saints in all over Europe? I remember spending summers in Naples, in a small peninsula in Naples, and the locals were talking about, well, there's a little church up there called San Cataldo, where San Cataldo is buried, seemingly. St. Cathal, buried in a little church up from Naples. How did these men evangelize? These men and women evangelize around Europe. They had a personal relationship with Christ, which spoke about where people saw an authentic leadership that they could follow. That they could, yeah, I'll follow this guy because this guy speaks to me. He brings God to us. And so this is where I would really love Irish Catholicism to focus on this year. Do not be distracted and deflected by the confusion in the church. This is not what God is asking us to focus on. God is asking us to focus on being men and women of Christ, being true leaders. You know, Sister Breach is a true leader of the faith because she speaks about her personal relationship with Christ. And we see the miracles around that woman. And so we can see in her a credible witness that will renew the church. That's a call to every single one of us in Ireland. If we love the faith, we must give this faith anew to the next generation. We must have union with God. That's our vocation. That's what we were called to do. That's our baptismal vocation, is union with God. Otherwise, the faith is a system, it's an ideology, it's a set of writings, it's a book, it's a history lesson, and it's so much more real. I often wonder when I go to Mass and after I've received communion, it's so soul-shattering. It's such a powerful encounter. I just can't understand why are we all the same afterwards? How can we leave the church and just go home and turn on the television? And do we not realize who we've encountered today, what he has done for us? This living encounter. I used to think I was strange. I used to think, how can you be the same? Like, do you not see what I see? Or am I just strange that I've just met God? I used to always think about this. Even as a child, I used to say, this is so strange. Like, I've just met God. I vividly remember my first communion. I've just met God. How can we? Isn't this great? And no, other people, they didn't see what I see. But maybe there's a reason for all of this. And it's a reason so that I can give you hope. So that you go and encounter Christ. You experience him. Don't listen to Robert's second-hand experience of all of this. You go into that mystery. You step into that union with God. Let your life be transformed by encountering Christ. Oftentimes we look at the past, the great things that were here. This was only great because these men had union with God. That's what made this place great. Why are so many people drawn to the monks in Mount Athos? They never spoke to us about a doctrine or a system. They lived by example. They fed us. They housed us. We worshipped with them. We prayed with them. That was the greatness that captivated hearts. And that's the greatness that keeps that place alive for 1,000 years. This is what we need to do in Ireland, is to look at the great saints that transformed this country. When my family came here to many centuries ago, we were often accused of being ultimately more Irish than the Irish themselves, by our cousins over in England. And there was something that captivated our family with this land. I don't know what it was, but it was surely the faith. I remember as a child, my uncle would tell us about the stories of our family. We were Knights Templar. We wrote poems where we secretly encoded our praise for the Blessed Mother. If you ever read the great works called Cynthia by Richard Nugent, you know, there were so many great stories that we were brought up with. You know, we rode into battle in the Battle of Hastings, and we built castles, and we built monasteries, and we built churches. But I think what captivated so many in our family, even going back to Gilbert Nugent, there is something that you just cannot abandon, which is this great faith, this encounter with Christ. And what's the most beautiful thing about this faith is the encounter. There is no thing, I cannot think of any other way. That's why you need to step into that encounter. You need to be a leader and show people how it's possible to have this encounter. And how do we find out how to have this encounter? The lives of the saints, those that have experienced it. From the Desert Fathers up to the present day, read them. Read their life, read how they experienced God, read what you have to do. And it's a very simple path, because it's a path of humility. You know, this is why Our Lady is stressing so much in places like Medjugorje Confession, Eucharist, Rosary, because these are extremely powerful spiritual tools. You know, so I really want to give this encouragement to Irish Catholics this year, that you don't sit back, especially if you love the faith, and be demotivated and demoralized. Oh, we can't do this, or we can't do this. If you have union with God, God will use you. God will transform the lives around you. And you have to speak about this union with passion and conviction, so that other people are convicted by your message. Because unless we are convicted by this, nobody else is going to be convicted. We will never evangelize. This morning, Carol Kelso, being Catholic Media, she put out a video. And if you listen to this video, you'll see her conviction about this. It's going to be an incredible time to be Catholic. But it's going to be a time of challenge. And the only way we will challenge people this century, this millennium, is if we have union with God. If we have taken the time to purify ourselves, to know ourselves, to journey to that union with God, to spend time with Him, to come to deserted places like this and meditate what God has done for you, who He is, and experience Him, experience His voice, experience His encounter. And to give people that, to show them, to pilgrim with them, to help them, to lead them, to pray with them, and to found communities like this where people can come and encounter, in your witness, God. The monks of Mount Athos didn't catechize me. All they did is feed, clothed if you needed clothing, housed, prayed. You know, the simple things. And this is what people are yearning for. You know, why are people attracted to places like Jim Brown's place down in Killadoon? He built a chapel. He feeds people. He talks to them. He shows them. He teaches them how to pray. This is what people are looking for. This is what people need. You know, it's an utter tragedy that we are allowing 800 people every year to take their lives without being credible witnesses of hope. And so I beg Irish Catholics to take up this challenge, which is not my challenge. This is the challenge that the saints have set us through the centuries, especially the Irish saints. Union with God. Let God transform you. Enter the door of union with God. You know, go to confession. Very powerful. Let your life be transformed by prayer. Look at what the guys in Derry are doing. Termabaka. We give this hope anew to Ireland. And so this is my plea, my challenge to people. You know, we can criticize the confusion all we like, but unless we are saints, and there is no alternative in Christianity other than sanctity and sainthood, not the title that they put on people here on earth. That's our destiny in heaven. That starts here. That starts with our union with God. There is no other option for us Catholics than that sainthood, that sanctity, and that union with God, that journey of purification. So that people see in us a credible witness of changed men and women who will be the leaders in the faith this year. God bless you. Take care. Bye-bye. Look, you're bigger than the apostle now. Do you remember the photos there? Oh my gosh, so many years ago. Ah! You remember?
You know.
3 years ago.
The credential is bigger.
Yeah, the credential is bigger.
Now next.